I've been an environmentalist since I was really young. I went to my first whale stranding when I was 14 and I set up the paper recycling at my high school. I studied law and did all the environmental law papers that I could, and to memorialise the things I believed in as a young person, I got a tattoo, and it's a tattoo of a green symbol of a tree. I went to the UK and I was introduced really to birds for the first time there, which was a bit of a surprise because I was seeing the birds that I'd read about in Enid Blyton and Beatrix Potter since a young child, and they really fascinated me. And coming back to Aotearoa in 2006 was when I really started to appreciate how central bird life is to this country, how uniquely lucky we are with all of these species which are nowhere else in the world, and that beautiful bird song. But it's also when I started to appreciate how at risk so many of these species are, and therefore how close to my heart, because the idea of extinctions just breaks my heart. And so that's really what led me to be wanting to be part of the Predator-Free 2050 movement. I want to be part of these solutions for these species which I just love so much and which give me so much joy. So you can see out here we've got Toria, which are oyster catchers. There's a couple up on the bank there and then further down the beach. I've definitely seen a couple of dotterel down there, and it looks like one's just a young chick. And then a bit further up on the bank there you can see the pied stilts, the poaka, like just one of my favourite birds because they're so elegant on the beach, but when you see them in the air they've got these long crazy red legs which they trail behind them when they're flying. One of the things which has really struck me since I've been leading Predator-Free 2050 Limited is how much more there is to these programs than just conservation outcomes. You know, I remember one of my first conversations when I started in the role, James down in Predator-Free Wellington, he talked to me about the fact that he was using this work to create social outcomes. We're creating social outcomes using conservation, he said to me, and it really struck me, and so I've started looking for that every time I engage with a project. One of the things I'm really interested in is how we start to think about resilience and community as things like climate change start to take effect for us. And so what I really loved and saw over and over again in the Predator-Free Wellington project is this is a community that are connected through the love of what they're doing, the love of their place, and that they are dealing with predators together. I remember having a moment of someone I know who lives in Miramar and her sense of complete ownership of that project because she's got a trap in her own backyard. And for me that felt like a really important feature of what the Predator-Free movement is creating. So I started getting interested in this idea of well-being and how the Predator-Free 2050 movement is creating well-being well beyond the conservation outcomes. The Mental Health Foundation talk about these 5 features of well-being. One of them is connect. And actually what you see in all of the projects that we work with is the connections which are being created. Our projects can't be successful unless they're building connections on the ground. For the projects which are working in urban environments, they need to build really strong relationships with the people who are going to be going out and clearing traps or having traps in their backyards. An eradication project is never going to be successful unless that whole community is on board and engaged. And you can't get that engagement unless you really invest in people connecting with each other. So that's really important, that idea of connection. And I see that in so many of the projects we're working in. Predator-Free South Westland, at the moment they're having to do this work to build the relationships with the farmers and the people in Franz Joseph who are going to be involved in the project. You see it here on Waiheke with the work that Mary has led, with the whole community coming together to feel good about the idea that they're going to be eradicating stoats and soon rats from this island. And what Mary always reminds me of is that people love this place and they do it because they're connected to this place. And so I think it's really interesting that people have this experience of being connected to a place, but also that's a vehicle by which they connect to each other. One of the other well-beings is this idea of giving, that your mental health can be enhanced by giving back. And it's absolutely the case that all of the projects we're working with have volunteers involved, and extraordinary numbers of volunteers. You know, one of the things which has really surprised me is how many New Zealanders are involved in this work, how many are, you know, providing their accounting skills, or they're providing governance, or they're doing GIS mapping, or they're on the ground clearing out traps or putting traps out. You know, there are so many Kiwis involved in this work. And for all of those hours they are giving, that is a protective factor for their mental well-being. There's a lot of talk about this wonderful idea of forest bathing, you know, spending time in nature and how good it is for us. I remember Lou Sanson from DOC once saying to me that, you know, 3 days in the bush was equivalent to like a month's holiday. It's so good for us to be out in the environment. And so another feature of really good well-being is the ability to take notice, to be present, to be able to be in your environment, to be affected by what you're hearing and what you're seeing. And being out in the bush, if that's the way you're contributing to Predator Free 2050, is just such a neat opportunity to do that. So I'm imagining that there's all of these people involved in this work who are able to just be present because they are in this beautiful countryside, getting to take part in nature. And that's really good for them, another protective factor for mental health. One of the things I really love about Predator Free is that it's the idea that we're doing eradication, not suppression, and that's a really different mindset. It's requiring people to kind of innovate, take adaptive management approaches to things, to try new stuff. And actually what that's encouraging everyone in this movement to do is to keep learning. One of the things I really enjoy seeing is these projects bringing in young people who, you know, are starting out on the trap lines, putting out traps. But we know what's going to happen is that they're going to have to learn to think about the behaviour of these species that we're trying to eliminate. They're going to have to be thinking about how you lay out traps and where. There's so much technical project management capability required to do this well. And so the people involved are going to continue to grow and learn. One of my favourite stories actually in my whole time at Predator Free is what's happening at Korihaha Whakahau, which is a Ngāti Awa-led project down in Whakatane. And they have recruited a bunch of fantastic rangatahi from their neighbourhood, all Māori and all coming from exclusion and disadvantage. What that project has done is it has made sure all of those young people have got their driver's licence. Now that sounds like a really small thing, but from my previous roles, I know that one of the biggest factors of getting young people into prison or into the criminal justice system are driver's licence and driving offences, driving without a licence and then not being able to pay the fine. So getting these young people set up with a driver's licence is just setting them up for success. It's helping them avoid those potential risks, but it's also giving them a really key enabler for their future. And then the final factor in, protective factors around well-being is to be active. And again, all of those people who are out in our bush setting traps or clearing traps or, just going to visit the bush are getting the opportunity to be active. It's probably the most well-known approach to looking after well-being. I know that I have to regularly go swimming or running in order to look after my own mental health. And I just think it's so cool that people can be part of the Predator Free 2050 movement and be out in the bush, and it's also helping them look after themselves. And how long have you been volunteering for Te Korowai, Judy?
Oh, since it started.
And before.
but I've been
Before Te Korowai
volunteering on the
started.
island for about 20 plus years.
One of the things which I thought was really important about the findings from what happened in Christchurch with the terrible mosque shootings was, one of the key findings was how important social cohesion is. And when I look across the Predator-Free 2050 movement, that's what I see the people on the ground are creating. They're creating cohesion between people who might not otherwise interact. They're building relationships between people who might never have a reason to connect. They might have completely different political views, different socioeconomic status. They might be from New Zealand, they might be from overseas. So this opportunity to bring people together around a shared purpose and a shared goal is a really powerful way for all of us to help create the social cohesion we're going to need as a nation if we want to rise above what happened down in Christchurch. One of the things which I really love about the way the projects are working on the ground is that they are increasingly working in ways which are in a partnership model with mana whenua. In fact, some of our projects are entirely led by mana whenua. And I think that's a really wonderful way that we as a country and those people who are involved in Predator Free can start to build our capability to work in a partnership way under Te Tiriti. You know, as a nation, we are starting to move in that direction, and there's lots of learning and lots of unlearning that we're doing. And I feel really proud of the projects that we work with, that they are on that journey. You know we don't always get it right, and that sometimes it's hard, but I think it's so important that we start to try and that we are doing that together. Te Ao Māori takes a much more holistic approach to things. It brings together, you know, people and the land in this place. And I think that's really important for us to reflect on when we think about the Predator Free 2050 movement. It's really easy to believe that that's just about conservation outcomes. But if you have that more holistic lens, you can start to see that it's creating value in all sorts of places for people, for birds, for communities. And so I guess the thing I would invite all of us to do is to start to wonder about the value we're creating in our projects, which might not be the core purpose, but is actually really important for our communities, for people, and for the place. And I think sometimes that's just about looking at these things in a different way. One of the things that makes me so optimistic that we will be predator free by 2050 is how involved people are. But it's going to take all of us. You know, what COVID taught us is that we need the team of 5 million to eliminate COVID. Well, we're going to need the team of 5 million if we're going to eradicate stoats, rats and possums from Aotearoa. But the good news is that process is going to create value, not just in conservation outcomes, but it's also going to create value for all of the people who are involved. And I think that's why it's so useful and so important to focus on the well-being outcomes of the work. Because what it helps us understand is that we're building community, we're connecting, we're looking after our mental health, and all of those things are good for our country. You know, it's not by accident that we have a well-being budget and a living standards framework. We are a nation that have decided that we are going to make well-being matter. And what a huge opportunity Predator Free 2050 offers for that. So please, get involved.